A millionaire was having a heart attack. Everyone in the room was in a panic, not knowing what to do. Suddenly, a calm voice cut through the chaos. "Relax. I'm a doctor." Help came from where no one ever expected. It was supposed to be just another ordinary morning in the mirrored building where million-dollar decisions were made. Inside, executives in tailored suits spoke in projections, mergers, and record-breaking profits. But that day, something shattered the bubble of perfection. A strange, dry, desperate sound echoed from the office of the most powerful man in the company. Muffled screams. Chairs scraping. For a moment, time stood still, as if even the air understood something serious was about to unfold. Livia, quietly cleaning the hallway, noticed the chaos before any manager or executive assistant. Her eyes caught the sudden movement, the creaking door, and a guttural sound that didn't belong in any financial report. While everyone froze, she was the only one who ran toward the danger. On the floor, a man used to controlling everything was now gasping for air. His collar unbuttoned, face red, fingers clutching his chest. The signs were obvious. He was having a heart attack. The irony of the scene was brutal. The same man who inspired respect, even fear, now depended on the courage of a woman most people in that building didn't even notice. Livia, the janitor. And in that moment, the entire hierarchy collapsed. Titles, bonuses, private offices, none of it mattered anymore. Faced with death, only humanity remained. And there, in that luxurious room now filled with panic, something began to truly change. As Augusto's body twisted on the floor, the heavy silence was replaced by chaotic noise. Fernanda, the ever-poised and organized secretary, was shaking so badly she could barely dial 911. The words wouldn't come out, and her eyes darted between the phone and her boss's agonizing face. It was as if the corporate manual she had followed her whole life had no page for when the heart of a titan fails in front of everyone. The German bankers, who minutes earlier had been loudly discussing numbers, now stood frozen, exchanging nervous glances. They understood risk and investment, but this wasn't in any spreadsheet. One of them tried to say something in English, voice weak and uncertain, but no one really understood. The emotional paralysis was so intense, even language lost its meaning. In that moment, the power of money meant absolutely nothing. Calls to emergency services kept failing. Trembling fingers dialed wrong numbers. The line seemed endless to connect. It was as if the world was mocking them. So much technology, so much power, and yet no one could ask for help. And in the middle of that collective breakdown, a figure once invisible began to stand out, as if chaos had chosen an unlikely leader. Amid the confusion, when even the most experienced were lost, a firm voice cut through the air like a blade. "I'm a doctor." It was like time had been slapped across the face. Everyone turned, stunned, toward the woman in a simple uniform, her hair tied back in haste, still wearing cleaning gloves. Livia walked into the office with the presence of someone who knew exactly what needed to be done. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't stutter. She didn't wait for authorization. She simply acted. "Loosen his tie. Bring cold water. Step back." The commands came out sharp and clear, and for the first time, someone was obeyed without question. It was unbelievable to see those same executives, who barely acknowledged her in the elevator, now running to follow her instructions. Livia knelt beside Augusto, checked his vitals, counted his pulse, and began emergency maneuvers with the confidence of someone who had done this dozens of times. The cleaning service had turned into a medical intervention. Then came the lightning bolt. "I'm a cardiologist. I worked in hospitals for 15 years before this." A heavy, stunned silence followed, as if everyone had to suddenly recalculate everything they thought they knew about her. In that moment, the story flipped. The janitor became the specialist. The invisible became essential. But one question still lingered unspoken in the room. What had led such an experienced doctor to work as a janitor in that building? The scene felt like something out of a movie no one was ready to watch. The woman who swept the corners of the hallway yesterday was now leading a resuscitation procedure in front of international bankers and high-level directors. Her hands moved with near-surgical precision, her eyes scanning every vital sign with the calm urgency of someone who knew that each second could be the last. There was no hesitation. Livia was in command, her entire body radiating experience. Even without understanding how this was possible, everyone obeyed. Fernanda held the bag as if her life depended on it. One of the Germans held his phone flashlight to illuminate Augusto's pale face. No one dared to question. It was as if their collective instinct recognized the only real authority in the room. Her janitor badge still hung from her pocket, but she was something else now. The expert, the anchor between life and death. Then, as if responding to someone he trusted, Augusto's body began to react. A slight flutter of the eyelids, a forced breath, color slowly returning to his cheeks. A miracle, some would say. But for Livia, it was simply the practical application of everything she had studied and lived. And yet, the most powerful revelation wasn't just that she saved him, but what her very presence there said about the world, about opportunity, and about silent judgment. The ICU's harsh white light stung Augusto's eyes as he woke. He blinked slowly, trying to piece together the chaotic fragments of that morning. He remembered the pain in his chest, the blurred faces, the cold floor, and a firm, almost maternal voice saying, "Stay with me. You're going to breathe." That voice wouldn't leave his mind. It wasn't just any doctor's voice. It felt familiar, but he didn't know why. As if life itself was trying to show him something he had always refused to see. Hours later, when he opened his eyes again, she was there. Livia. Standing by his bed, now wearing a lab coat, but with the same calm presence she had during the chaos. For a moment, Augusto thought it was a hallucination. The janitor? That nearly invisible woman from the hallways? But there was no denying it. It was the same look, the same voice, the same steady presence that pulled him back from the brink of death. He sat in silence, trying to grasp how someone he barely noticed had become his only chance at survival. She explained everything calmly, without emotion or expectation. She was a doctor, a cardiologist, years of experience, pulled away from the profession for personal reasons. She asked for no apology, no recognition, just told the facts. And in that moment, for the first time in years, Augusto felt small. Not because he was lying in a hospital bed, but because he realized how often he judged based on appearances. And that stung more than any physical pain. Little did he know, this reunion was just the beginning of a much greater twist. The next morning, still in the hospital, whispers of her name began echoing through the corridors. The ICU's lead cardiologist, after reviewing the emergency notes and seeing Augusto's stable condition, raised an eyebrow. The protocol was followed with absolute precision. "Who was with him before the ambulance arrived?" she asked, surprised. When she heard the name Livia, she frowned and asked to speak to her directly. What she heard next was almost unbelievable. With humble composure, Livia walked her through everything she had done. As she spoke, the lead doctor's eyes widened. "You're a physician, aren't you?" she asked. And when Livia handed over her old medical ID, there was no doubt left. Dr. Livia Silva, cardiologist, former member of the elite staff at the renowned Hospital das Clínicas, a reference in emergency interventions. A woman who had vanished from the medical world, only to reappear in full action. The medical staff, used to working with prestigious specialists, fell silent in respect. Not just because of her resume, but because of her actions. Many said, without exaggeration, that if Augusto had waited for standard medical response, he might not have survived. It was one of those rare moments when brilliance shines outside of conventional places. And as admiration grew, so did a troubling question. How did a woman with such a brilliant career end up cleaning offices? Her name began circulating like a mystery among hospital corridors and boardrooms alike. How could a top-level cardiologist vanish from the system and reappear as a janitor in a corporate building? Some younger doctors began digging into old archives, research articles, conference lists. They found her name on important studies, international lectures, even award ceremonies. It was like finding a diamond buried in concrete. Everyone wanted to know her story. Then the truth began to surface. Years ago, Livia had done something few dare to. She exposed a massive health fraud scheme involving embezzlement and overpricing of medication. And like many who challenge broken systems, she wasn't praised, she was silenced. She faced veiled threats, professional isolation, and eventually a so-called voluntary leave, which was actually a retreat to protect her life and integrity. For all that time, no one knew where she had gone. No trace, no record, as if she'd vanished. But she hadn't disappeared. She had chosen to survive on the margins of the very system that tried to erase her. And now, by irony or fate, it was that very invisibility that allowed her to save the life of one of the city's most powerful men. But the impact of her return was only just beginning. As Augusto recovered, one truth haunted him more than any medical chart. He almost died without ever seeing the people around him. In the following days, he remembered how many times he passed Livia in the halls and didn't even return her good morning. She had been invisible to him, like so many people with enormous stories hidden behind simple uniforms. And yet, when his life was hanging by a thread, it was that same woman who chose to save him. In a quiet visit, eyes still damp, voice trembling, Augusto thanked her. But it was Livia's response that echoed inside him like a call to conscience. We save lives. It doesn't matter whose. There was no bitterness, no judgment, only the ethics of someone who believes that life matters more than pride, and that the duty to care rises above all vanity. That phrase said a lot about her, and maybe even more about who he had always been. Clara, Augusto's daughter, was also deeply moved. Seeing her father vulnerable, and hearing everything that had happened, made her see Livia with new eyes. Eyes of respect, and more than that, admiration. For the first time, father and daughter agreed on something without argument. A person's worth isn't defined by appearances, job titles, or bank accounts. It's revealed in the choices we make when no one's watching. And that realization would begin to reshape not only their lives, but the future of the company itself. Livia's story spread fast, not just through the hospital halls or inside the company. It reached the investors' boardroom. Meller, the cold, pragmatic German banker, requested a private meeting with Augusto as soon as he was discharged. With his heavy accent, he got straight to the point. I've never seen a company where even the cleaning staff saves lives. That says more about your team than any report. It was the first time Augusto had seen that man, always so calculating, speak with admiration. Meller went on. He said companies are made of people, and that if an invisible employee could act with such preparation, ethics, and compassion, then deep down, there must be a culture that allows that to flourish, even if leadership hasn't realized it yet. Investors don't just look for numbers. We look for collective character. And your company demonstrated that, through her actions. It was the kind of praise no marketing campaign could buy, the kind only earned through genuine acts. Stunned, Augusto listened in silence. It took a while to sink in. He had always believed a company's value lived in quarterly charts and speed of execution. But now he understood. Its true value lived in people, in the stories they carry, in the talents lost to rushed judgments. And as he processed it all, something unfamiliar stirred inside him, the desire to rebuild, not spreadsheets, relationships. The next morning, Augusto got out of bed with a weight that wasn't from the heart attack, but something deeper. A burning need to look Livia in the eyes and finally understand who she truly was. A formal thank you wouldn't suffice. Nor would a generous bonus. Something inside him demanded more. For the first time in a long time, he wanted to listen without interrupting, to understand without judging, to know without rushing. And for a man like him, that was a monumental step. It was almost like learning how to be human again. He went to the office, but she was gone. Her uniform hung on a hook. Her badge left neatly on the desk. No explanation. She just said her job here was done, a human resources rep told him. Augusto felt a strange emptiness. Not because she had left, but because he didn't know how to begin repairing years of neglect. For the first time, he felt what so many feel when they miss a chance. the regret of not seeing someone's worth sooner. But he didn't give up. He hired a private investigator, dug through records, called doctors, former colleagues, until he found a lead. Livia lived far away, in a modest neighborhood, living quietly. So he went. No driver, no suit, no show, just a question in his eyes, and a sincere desire to do things differently. Because deep down, he knew, his life had been saved by someone he ignored every single day. And maybe, the only way to save himself was to rescue that story. Their first face-to-face meeting was thick with tension. Augusto couldn't hide his discomfort. He tried to mask it with pleasantries, but his face betrayed him. He was ashamed. Seeing a brilliant cardiologist cleaning floors he himself had walked across without ever looking down, felt like a moral punch to the gut. "How did this happen?" he asked in a near whisper, as if the question hurt him more than it hurt her. Livia, calm, simply replied, "Not every fresh start comes with a new badge, Mr. Augusto." Meanwhile, Muller confided in another investor what he now considered the company's greatest asset. If even the lowest-ranked positions harbor such extraordinary talent, imagine what else this team might be hiding. To him, the whole situation was a sign of organizational resilience, a kind of silent wealth that doesn't show up on balance sheets, but reveals itself in actions. It was a living lesson that human capital is, indeed, the most valuable asset any company can have. Augusto swallowed hard when he heard that. The carefully constructed image of leadership he'd built over the years felt fragile compared to the quiet greatness of someone like Livia. His initial shame was now mixed with a genuine desire to rebuild bridges, not for a good photo op, but to change what really mattered. He was starting to understand that sometimes, true leadership begins with the humility to admit you weren't as wise as you thought. Miller, though a man of numbers, trusted intuition. And his mistaken assumption that the company valued its people so deeply that even a brilliant cardiologist would choose to work in janitorial services, left him deeply impressed. "If you can attract and retain talent of that caliber, then your workplace must be special," he said, before signing a €50 million loan proposal. No one dared correct the misunderstanding. Not even Augusto. It was as if the universe itself was blending irony and justice in perfect harmony. Augusto held that contract with trembling hands, torn between financial relief and moral shame. That fortune was approved, indirectly, thanks to someone he had ignored for 2 years. The thought haunted him. How many other opportunities had he missed by judging on appearance alone? How many other Livias had passed him by, unseen? His mind reeled as he processed the fact that the most important investment of his career came from a perception both completely wrong and, somehow, entirely right. Back in his office, he stared out the window. Not with arrogance, but with humility. He knew the money would solve the company's immediate problems, but it wouldn't heal the root issue, the culture of invisibility he helped create. And right there, he started sketching a plan. Not to explain the misunderstanding to Muller, but to turn that accident into a new beginning. One that might offer others the chance he almost stole from Livia. The truth about Livia's life came with no filters, and no happy endings. When Augusto chose to learn more about her daily reality, he saw a life he never could have imagined. She left the company at 7 p.m. after a full cleaning shift and went straight to the hospital, where she worked as a nursing assistant. That's right, a respected physician, reduced to a support role because her degree had been buried by the system. 16 hours of work. Every day. No rest. No glamour. She lived with her elderly mother and 2 young children in a distant neighborhood. Every cent was counted. Every meal, carefully planned. There was no luxury, but there was dignity. A dignity that didn't come from where she worked, but how she worked. Augusto said nothing when he visited her home. It was modest, clean, full of books and toys. Not a place of failure, as he might have once assumed, but a sanctuary of quiet resistance. And in that moment, something inside him cracked, or perhaps awakened. The prejudice he carried, even if unconsciously, stood face to face with reality. Livia wasn't an exception. She was a symbol of a system that fails to recognize value when it doesn't come wrapped in luxury. And as he realized that a woman like her had to split herself across 2 jobs just to survive, Augusto began to understand the gap between merit and opportunity. A gap he could no longer ignore. The next week, Augusto returned to the hospital, but this time, not as a patient. He came with an official proposal, and a look of genuine respect on his face, something he had never shown that woman before. When Livia walked into the improvised meeting room, he stood up nervously, as if facing someone far greater than himself. "This time, I'm the one offering an opportunity," he said, sliding an envelope across the table. Inside, a formal offer: medical director of the corporate health division. Competitive salary, full benefits, and more than anything, recognition. Livia held the paper like it might burn her hands. Her eyes welled with tears, but she took a deep breath before replying. "For 2 years, I was invisible in those halls. Now you see me. That changes everything." It was a simple phrase, but packed with meaning. Because for someone whose reputation had been unjustly tarnished, who fought to preserve her dignity while mopping floors, that gesture wasn't just a promotion. It was redemption. It was the world finally whispering, "You were right all along." Augusto, too, was moved. It wasn't just a thank you. It was a silent apology. A recognition that he had failed, not as a CEO, but as a human being. In offering that position, he wasn't just opening a professional door, he was returning to Livia something she should never have lost: the right to occupy the space she had earned with merit. And in that moment, a new chapter began. For her. And for him. A few days later, at Livia's invitation, Augusto visited shopping Ciudad Tiradentes. To him, it was another world: discount stores, kids running through the halls, loud music from an electronics kiosk. But for her, it held history. It was where she shopped with her mom, where she had rare coffees on her days off, where dreams and bills collided. She met him with no lab coat, no gloves. Just a shy, genuine smile. They sat in the food court. Between bites of coxinia and sips of box juice, she told her story. The tough childhood. The seamstress mother who performed miracles with what little they had. The scholarship that got her into med school, the brutal internships, sleepless nights, and the diploma she almost couldn't collect, because she couldn't afford the bus. Augusto sat quietly, like a man stepping down from a pedestal and touching real ground for the first time. Each word dismantled a bias inside him. The woman he once saw as just a janitor was in truth a monument of resilience. Livia never played the victim. She spoke with pride, even of the pain. When she said she still lived with her mother because the rent was too high, that her husband was unemployed, her daughter was seriously ill and needed constant care, and she was raising her nephew after her sister's death, Augusto couldn't hide his emotion. Right there, in the middle of a modest shopping mall, he finally understood something no MBA could teach. Character isn't measured by a badge. It's measured by the scars a person carries with dignity. Among the many stories Livia shared, one weighed heaviest on her heart: her daughter's diagnosis. A rare blood condition requiring constant and costly treatment, the kind of thing that couldn't be postponed or ignored. For Livia, every doctor's visit, every test, every dose of medication was a silent battle. It drained not only their finances but the strength of her entire family. It was a daily fight to give her daughter the chance at a life as close to normal as possible, despite the fragility. Health insurance, which many viewed as just another corporate benefit, was for Livia a lifeline, the fragile thread separating hope from despair. Without a formal job and a steady paycheck, there was no way she could cover the mounting medical expenses. The safety that insurance provided was the only thing keeping her family stable amid a storm of medical and financial chaos. Each day without that coverage was a risk she simply couldn't afford to take, and that was the harsh reality for so many living on the margins of the system. When Augusto heard her story, he realized that recognizing and uplifting Livia was about far more than corporate restructuring. It was about justice, about empathy, about humanity. He felt the weight of his position, not just as the head of a company, but as a leader of a community. And in that moment, something shifted inside him. the desire to be part of the solution, not the problem. Augusto saw in Livia a sign, a call to transform the very culture of the company. He launched a comprehensive occupational health program, starting with regular checkups for every employee, regardless of their title. It was time to prove that healthcare was not a privilege reserved for executives, but a right for all. The goal was to detect problems before they became crises, to invest in real, preventative care. In addition to medical exams, the company built an in-house clinic, fully equipped to handle minor emergencies and provide immediate support. It wasn't just about physical safety, it was a statement of genuine care. First aid training was rolled out company-wide, empowering employees across all departments to act when it mattered most. Gradually, the workplace began to evolve, from a sterile, distant environment to one that felt human, one that cared. The transformation was slow, but visible. Employees who had long felt invisible were finally being seen and cared for. And that shift, though small at first, carried the power to create a ripple effect, inspiring other leaders to rethink their own practices and priorities. Because, in the end, the true wealth of a company lies in the health and lives of those who make it all happen. Word spread quickly through the hallways. The company's new medical director was none other than Livia, the former cleaning lady. Eyes exchanged glances of disbelief and curiosity. Many couldn't wrap their heads around it. Some whispered half-true stories, trying to understand how that quiet woman now sat in an executive office. But over time, Livia's firm, empathetic, and deeply human presence began to silence the doubt. She didn't demand respect, she earned it. She knew the name of every support worker, listened attentively to the concerns of the technical staff, and treated everyone with the same dignity a doctor would give to a critical patient. Slowly, her colleagues stopped seeing just the cleaning lady, and began to see the brilliant physician, the resilient woman who carried so much more than a badge or a title. She carried a story of courage. The recognition didn't come with flowers. It came with kinder eyes, genuine collaboration, and even silent apologies. Livia had triumphed, not just by climbing the corporate ladder, but by elevating the very meaning of humanity in the workplace. And that, in itself, was revolutionary. Augusto began to see each employee differently. People he once passed without a second glance, those cleaning the halls, pouring the coffee, he now saw clearly. He understood, finally, that behind every uniform was a story, a struggle, a person with dreams and unique potential. Livia, through her quiet and resilient journey, had taught him, and the entire company, that dignity is not measured by a title, but by character. Her greatest lesson came not from a podium, but from the quiet dignity with which she endured 2 years of silent humiliation, never losing the light in her eyes or the respect she showed to others. Even as a fully qualified doctor, Livia never saw herself as better than anyone. She worked in silence, with humility, while others judged her by her appearance. Her actions proved that true greatness lives in those who serve with heart, not those who sit at the top. That lesson spread through the company like a new core value. From that moment on, Augusto implemented empathy and respect training across departments, reinforcing one undeniable truth: every human being carries non-negotiable worth, no matter what their paycheck says. The company's culture began to change, all because of a woman who once cleaned the floors with the same dignity she now used to save lives. For years, Augusto had believed that constant pressure and aggressive goals were marks of productivity. But after everything that happened with Livia, he began to really look at his own team, and what he saw terrified him. Hollow eyes, long silences during meetings, frequent absences for personal reasons. Slowly, he realized something he'd never noticed before. The environment he helped build was making people sick. Livia, now the company's medical director, was the first to speak up with clarity. It's not just the reports that are bleeding. It's the people. And she was right. Anxiety, panic attacks, insomnia, even severe gastritis, these conditions were becoming common among employees. The constant pressure, fear of mistakes, lack of acknowledgement, it created a level of tension so high that the body began to speak what the mind could no longer hold in silence. That wake-up call led to a deep internal restructuring. Real wellness policies were introduced. safe spaces for open dialogue, more humane goals, company-wide psychological support. Because when an employee breaks down emotionally, the problem isn't just theirs, it belongs to the culture. And culture, Augusto now understood, was a direct responsibility of leadership. It was time to heal the company from the inside, before someone else broke in silence. Augusto had always been feared. His mere presence could silence an entire room. With strict targets and a cold speech about meritocracy, he believed leadership meant control and results. But recent events, especially his time with Livia, forced him to face the mirror. And he didn't like what he saw. For the first time, he realized that his posture had driven away talent, drained people's spirits, and fed a suffocating environment. The change came slowly. He swapped his closed-door office for regular walks through departments. He began asking people how they were, and waiting for the answer. He cut back on meetings done just for ego, started delegating with trust, and accepted that vulnerability is also strength. The first time he apologized publicly for a rushed decision, the room fell into stunned silence, followed by respect. His team was beginning to see a new Augusto, more human, more present. But the biggest transformation wasn't in the company, it was in him. Augusto discovered the value of empathy, humility, and connection. He learned that leading isn't about climbing to the top and shouting orders, it's about descending every step and rising with others. Now he knows that companies don't grow with profits. They grow with people. And people need to be cared for, valued, and heard. It took an invisible cardiologist to show him that a company's heart needs to beat with more humanity too. One ordinary afternoon, the phone rang. Livia's heart raced when she saw the caller ID, Hospital das Clínicas. On the other end, the coordinator said, "We're rebuilding our team, and we'd like you to come back. The position is yours, if you want it." For a few seconds, Livia was speechless. It was the place where everything began, and where everything once fell apart. The offer carried the weight of opportunity and the quiet relief of long overdue recognition. That night, she walked alone to the little square near her house, the same one she'd gone to on hard days. She sat in silence and thought of everything: her daughter's illness, the double shifts, the long days of cleaning, the judgmental stares, the pain of being invisible despite having so much to offer. And there, among the wind and memories, she realized she was no longer the same woman who had left that hospital years ago. She was stronger, whole. She no longer sought validation, she sought purpose. She heard that the people involved in the old scheme had been removed, that a new leadership was in place, with new values, and that the hospital wanted a fresh start, beginning with her. They offered double her previous salary, a prestigious position, and the freedom to build her own team. It was the kind of proposal any doctor would dream of. But Livia didn't give an immediate answer. Some wounds from that place still hadn't healed. Some memories hurt more than any number on a contract could fix. At home, with the offer in hand and her daughter sleeping on the couch, Livia read through every clause. This wasn't just a job offer, it was an unspoken apology. A chance to rewrite a story where there had only been injustice. As tempting as it was to say yes right away, she knew she needed to listen to her heart. And her heart told her it wasn't just about going back. It was about how and why. So, she went to see Augusto. She told him everything: the offer, the salary, the symbolic weight behind it. He listened quietly, eyes filled with pride and fear of losing her. Then he said, "That's where you've always belonged. This is your chance to rebuild it all." Livia was silent for a long moment. Then, softly, she asked, "Can I ask you something?" Her voice almost broke. "Would you still support me if I chose not to go?" His expression softened. "I'd support you on any path. Because now, you've already proven your worth, to them, and to yourself." The story made the cover of Exame magazine with a striking headline: "The Cleaner Who Became Medical Director and Revolutionized Corporate Health." The article didn't just highlight her unlikely journey, it revealed the real impact of her work: a dramatic drop in medical leaves, improved workplace morale, and reduced stress levels. Livia, who not long ago barely had time to eat lunch between cleaning shifts, was now a national example of human-centered innovation in the corporate world. Her story went viral. Suddenly, she had become a symbol of transformation. Invitations started pouring in. First came interviews on TV shows and podcasts. Then, invitations to speak at preventive medicine conferences. Eventually, international events began calling. A conference in Lisbon wanted to hear from her. A symposium in Toronto listed her as a keynote speaker. To everyone, she embodied a new vision of leadership, empathy, and health, a rare fusion of technical expertise and lived experience from someone who had once been on the other side of dignity. Livia didn't speak with grandiosity. She spoke with truth. And that's what moved people. In the audience, executives, doctors, and students listened in complete silence. During one talk, she ended with a phrase that became iconic: "Healing doesn't always start with medicine. Sometimes, it starts when someone looks into your eyes and says, 'You matter.'" That line made headlines. In every country she visited, Livia planted a seed of hope, of empathy, of change. And wherever she went, she carried the simplicity of someone who had never forgotten where she came from or why she started. The auditorium in London was packed. Healthcare professionals from around the world, executives from global corporations, and eager students filled the seats, awaiting the day's final speaker, Livia Almeida, the American woman whose story had crossed oceans. When she stepped on stage in her white coat and serene smile, the applause felt endless. But Livia wasn't dazzled by the spotlight. Her eyes scanned the crowd for someone ordinary, someone invisible, as she once was. She began by saying, "For years, I went unnoticed in hospital hallways. I cleaned the very rooms I once dreamed of leading. And I learned that people don't just get sick from viruses or genetics, they get sick from not being seen, not being heard, not being valued." The room fell into stillness. She spoke of the doorman who had a heart attack after 14-hour shifts. The cleaning woman who lost a kidney because her symptoms were dismissed. She looked too fragile to be taken seriously. Livia reminded them that true prevention begins with listening, with empathy, with dignity. At the end, she looked across the room and said with quiet strength, "The future of medicine isn't just about technology. It's about humanity. And every company that ignores this is rotting from the inside." A hush came before the wave of emotion. People were crying, giving her a standing ovation. Livia hadn't just shared knowledge, she had touched hearts. That night, she didn't give a speech. She sparked a quiet revolution in every soul sitting in that hall. When she returned from London, Livia was welcomed at the airport by Helena, now 11, holding a bouquet of flowers. "Mommy, did you see how many likes you got on Instagram?" she giggled, jumping into her mother's arms. Beside them stood Livia's proud husband, her tearful father, and her mother, holding back tears with a smile full of pride. That simple scene, overflowing with meaning, was more than a homecoming. It was the reunion of a woman with her essence, her worth, and the unshakable love of the family who never gave up on her. On a quiet night, wearing pajamas and holding a warm glass of milk, Helena rested her head on her mother's shoulder and whispered, "When I grow up, I want to be a doctor like you. But I want to heal people with my heart, just like you do." Livia smiled, her chest filling with a warmth no award or recognition could ever match. That little girl, who had faced so much by her side, now dreamed inspired by the same strength that once kept her mother standing. And that, perhaps, was her greatest legacy. On weekends, it became common to see the whole family, Livia, her husband, Helena, and the grandparents, gathered at the park for picnics or helping with social initiatives from the Institute. The bond that was born from pain had now blossomed into strength, purpose, and pride. Helena began collecting biology books, playing doctor with her dolls, and telling everyone that her mom was the bravest doctor in the world. For Livia, after everything they had endured, that sincere love from her daughter was the ultimate proof. It had all been worth it.